The Arizona desert stretched endlessly as the sun dipped below jagged mountains, painting everything in amber and rust. Thomas McKenna sat alone beside his campfire, the crackling flames casting shadows across his weathered face. At 42, he carried solitude like a worn saddle blanket, familiar, heavy, impossible to shake. His cattle drive had ended 3 days ago in Tucson. Most hands had spent their wages on whiskey and women, but Thomas chose a different path, riding north toward his small ranch with only his horse Belle and the haunting desert silence for company. "Just you and me again, Belle," he murmured to his sorrel mare. Her ears flicked, the only response he'd received in hours. Thomas sipped bitter coffee from his battered tin cup. In his saddlebags lay supper remnants, jerky, hardtack, and a small can of peaches he'd been saving for a special occasion that never came. Soft rustling in the chaparral made Belle's ears prick forward. Thomas's hand moved instinctively to his Colt .45. "Who's there?" From behind prickly pear cactus emerged a figure so small and thin Thomas almost mistook it for firelight trickery. A boy, maybe 12 or 13, with long black hair and dark skin marking him as Apache. His clothes were rags, bare feet cut, and bleeding from harsh terrain. The boy stopped beyond the firelight circle, dark eyes fixed on Thomas, with desperate hunger and fear. He swayed as if standing was almost too much. "Jesus," Thomas whispered, hand falling from his weapon. "Kid, you look half dead." The boy's eyes moved to dying embers, then to saddlebags where Thomas kept food. The message was clear without words. Thomas had heard the stories: Apache raids, settlers killed, cattle stolen. But looking at the skeletal boy swaying in desert wind, he saw only a child in desperate need. "You hungry, son?" Thomas asked gently. The boy nodded once, barely perceptible. Thomas retrieved the peaches and remaining jerky, opened the can with his knife, and gestured for the boy to approach. "Come on over. Fire's warm, food enough for 2. The boy hesitated, every muscle ready to bolt. But hunger won over caution, and he stepped into firelight with careful grace of a wild animal approaching water. Thomas poured coffee into a second cup and handed it to the boy with the peaches. "Drink slow. Easy on the food. Don't want you getting sick." The boy took the cup with trembling hands, never taking eyes off Thomas's face. Then he began eating with desperate, careful bites. "What's your name, son?" The boy looked up from peaches. For a moment, Thomas thought he wouldn't answer. Then, barely above a whisper, "Anna. It means eternal blossom." "That's a fine name. I'm Thomas McKenna. Most folks call me Tom." "Where's your family, Ayana?" The boy's hand stilled, eyes darkening with pain. "Gone. Soldiers came. Blue coats. They took everyone to reservation. I ran. I hid." Thomas felt his chest tighten. "How long you been out here alone?" "Many sons," Ayana replied, holding up both hands, then 3 more fingers. "No food. No water sometimes. 13 days. This boy had survived 13 days alone in one of Earth's harshest environments. "Well, you're not alone tonight," Thomas said firmly. "And you're not going hungry." He pulled out a thick wool blanket. "Desert gets cold at night." Ayana accepted the blanket with wonder, wrapping it around his shoulders and moving closer to the fire. Thomas added wood to flames, and for the first time in months, silence didn't feel oppressive. Instead, it felt companionable, shared between 2 souls who'd found each other in vast emptiness. "Tell me about your family," Thomas said. Ayana's eyes grew distant. "My grandmother knew old stories. She said desert speaks to those who listen. My father was a good hunter. My mother sang to morning sun every day." "They sound like good people." They were. Ayana pulled the blanket tighter. "What of your family, Tom McKenna?" Thomas stared into fire. "Don't have one. Never married. Parents died when I was about your age. Been on my own since." "You are lonely," Ayana observed with startling directness. Thomas chuckled softly. "That obvious?" "Desert makes lonely people easy to see," Ayana said. "It takes away everything that is not true." The profound wisdom struck Thomas like a physical blow. This boy had articulated something Thomas felt, but never expressed. The desert had stripped away everything false, leaving only essential truth. He was utterly alone. But tonight, for the first time in years, he wasn't. Morning came with gentle desert sunrise, painting sky rose and gold. Thomas woke to find Ayanna already awake, sitting perfectly still beside dying embers, watching eastern horizon with ritual intensity. Morning prayers. Thomas asked quietly. Ayanna nodded. My grandmother taught me. Every sunrise's gift must be honored. When Ayanna finally turned back, Thomas saw a question in dark eyes. You go to reservation today? Turn me in for bounty. The question hit hard. No, Thomas said firmly. I'm not turning you in anywhere. Relief flickered across Ayanna's face. Then what? Thomas began breaking camp. I'm heading back to my ranch. About a day's ride north. You're welcome to come if you want. Why? Thomas paused, enrolling his bedroll. Because everybody deserves a chance, son. And maybe we both need the company. Your ranch. Others there? Just me. Got about 100 head of cattle, few horses. Not much, but it's home. You would trust Apache boy in your home. The question revealed prejudice Ayanna had faced. Thomas felt anger, not at the boy, but at a world teaching children to expect hatred. I trust the boy who shared my fire last night, Thomas said simply. Color doesn't enter into it. Something shifted in Ayanna's expression, a crack in his protective armor. In town, people say Apache are devils. Savages. People say a lot of things. Most of it's just fear talking. Thomas finished packing and mounted Bell, extending his hand. Come on. You can ride behind me. As they rode north, Ayanna pointed out things Thomas never noticed. Cacti that bloomed only after rain, animal tracks from hours earlier, distant smoke meaning water and possibly other Apache survivors. There, Ayanna said, pointing to barely visible smoke. My people. Some still free. Thomas studied the distant smoke. You want to go to them? Ayanna was quiet so long Thomas thought he wouldn't answer. They move always. Running. Hiding. No food, no safe place. Children cry from hunger. Is not life. Is only surviving. Thomas understood. The boy was torn between loyalty to his people and chance for something better. The offer stands. My ranch, long as you want. But if you ever want to leave, find your people. Nobody's stopping you. As they crested a rise, Thomas's ranch came into view. Modest buildings centered around simple adobe house with wide porch. That's home, Thomas said, pride evident despite humble appearance. Ayanna studied the layout with trained eye. Good water. Sweet well never goes dry. Creek runs year-round quarter-mile south. They reached the house at midday. Thomas dismounted, helped Ayanna down, then led Bell to the small barn where 2 horses nickered greeting. Those are Ranger and Scout. Good horses, getting old like me. Ayanna approached horses, with natural confidence, letting them smell his hands before stroking necks. They are wise. Old horses know much. Thomas smiled. That they do. He led the way to the house, suddenly aware of how sparse his living space was. Main room contained few handmade furniture pieces, stone fireplace, little else. There's a spare room back there. Nothing but bed and window, but it's yours if you want. Ayanna walked to the window, looking out at desert landscape. I can see far. Good for watching. Watching for what? Danger. Always watching for danger. The casual way he said it broke Thomas's heart. No child should live in constant fear. Well, you don't have to watch alone anymore. We'll watch together. That afternoon, Thomas took Ayanna into small town of Millerville for clothes and boots. Reaction was immediate and hostile. Conversations stopped when they entered the general store. Eyes followed with suspicion. Tom McKenna, called Sheriff Bradley. That's an Apache boy you got there. Yes, it is. He's with me. You know there's a reward for returning runaways to reservation. Thomas felt Ayanna tense. He's not a runaway, Sheriff. He's my guest. Apache boy can't be nobody's guest, Tom. Law says they belong on reservation. Law says a lot of things. Doesn't make them right. Thomas selected boots, work clothes, and warm coat for Ayanna, then approached the counter where the store owner waited with obvious reluctance. You sure about this, Tom? Having an Apache on your place might cause trouble. Only trouble I see is people making assumptions about a boy they don't know, Thomas replied, laying money down. As they left, Ayanna walked close to Thomas's side. They hate me. They hate what they think you represent. Fear makes people stupid, son. Don't let their stupidity become your problem. That evening, sitting on the front porch watching sunset, Ayanna spoke about the hatred they'd encountered. My father said white men fear us because we know secrets they've forgotten. How to live with land instead of fighting it. How to take only what is needed. What kind of secrets? Ayanna gestured toward desert, painted gold and purple in dying light. Desert teaches patience. Teaches everything has its season. Teaches survival comes from understanding, not fighting. White men seem to fight everything, land each other themselves. Not all white men, Thomas said. No, Ayanna agreed, looking at him with beginning trust. Not all. 3 weeks passed with surprising ease. Ayanna proved quick learner and willing worker, helping with cattle and horses with natural skill. He had intuitive understanding of animals and seemed to know what needed doing before being asked. For the first time in years, Thomas's house felt like home. Trouble came on a Tuesday morning in late October. Thomas was mending fence when he heard approaching horses. Too many, moving too fast. He dropped tools and ran toward the house. Riders coming. Thomas called to Ayanna, who was tending sick calf in barn. Get in the house. Too late. 6 men on horseback crested the rise and thundered into yard, led by Jake Morrison, local rancher known for hatred of Indians and quick temper. McKenna. Morrison shouted, not dismounting. We've come for the Apache. Thomas stepped into yard, hand resting on gun, but, afternoon, Jake. What brings you out this way? Don't play dumb, Tom. We know you got that Apache boy. Sheriff says you're harboring a reservation jumper. Boy's not bothering anybody. He's working for me, earning his keep. Apache don't work, sneered one of Morrison's men. They steal and kill. Thomas felt temper rising, but forced calm. You men are on my land uninvited. I'll ask you to leave. Morrison laughed harshly. Or what? You gonna take on all 6 of us for a savage? From his peripheral vision, Thomas saw Ayanna emerge from barn, moving with fluid grace. The boy's face was calm, but Thomas saw tension in shoulders. I'm here, Ayanna said simply, walking to stand beside Thomas. You want me, here I am. Smart boy, Morrison said, hand moving to rope. Come along quiet and nobody gets hurt. He's not going anywhere, Thomas said firmly. 6 armed men against Thomas and a boy, impossible odds. But Thomas had made a choice weeks ago when he shared his fire with a hungry child. Tom, Morrison said reasonably, be sensible. You're a good man, but sentiment's clouding your judgment. This Apache is dangerous. This Apache has been living in my house 3 weeks. He's helped with cattle, shared my meals, never given me trouble. That's how they work. Gain your trust, then strike when you're not expecting it. Thomas felt Ayanna shift beside him, saw hands clenched into fists. The accusations were awakening shame and self-doubt. You don't know what you're talking about. This boy has more honor than the lot of you together. Morrison's face darkened. Honor? From an Apache? Tom, you've been alone too long. It's addled your brain. Before Thomas could respond, Ayanna stepped forward. I will go, the boy said quietly. I will not let harm come to Tom McKenna because of me. No. Thomas's voice cracked like whip. You're not going anywhere. Tom, Ayanna said steadily despite fear in his eyes. These men will hurt you if I stay. I cannot let that happen. The boy's willingness to sacrifice himself hit Thomas like physical blow. This was real courage, not absence of fear, but facing it for someone else's sake. Nobody's going anywhere, Thomas repeated with absolute authority. Jake, you're trespassing. I'm ordering you to leave. Morrison's patience snapped. The hell with this. He spurred his horse forward, rope in hand. We're taking the Apache. What happened next took place in heartbeats. Morrison's horse charged forward. Thomas drew his gun and fired a warning shot into air, sound echoing like thunder. But Ayanna didn't wait to be rescued. With reflexes honed by a lifetime of dodging danger, the boy rolled under Morrison's horse and came up running, not away from confrontation, but toward barn where Thomas kept his rifle. "Stop him!" Morrison shouted. Two men spurred horses after Ayanna, but the boy was already diving through barn door. Thomas heard sharp crack of his Winchester and saw one pursuing horse rear up. "Next shot won't be over your head." Ayanna's voice rang out from barn. The situation had changed dramatically. Instead of one man facing six, it was now two armed defenders, with good cover against 6 men on horseback in the open. "This is insane," Morrison shouted. "Tom, you take up arms against your own kind for an Apache?" "I'm taking up arms against men who come onto my land threatening violence," Thomas replied, gun trained on Morrison's chest. For a tense moment, two sides faced each other across yard. Then Sheriff Bradley's voice cut through silence. "That's enough." The sheriff rode into yard with 2 deputies. "Everybody put your guns down. Now." Reluctantly, Thomas lowered his weapon. Ayanna emerged from barn, rifle pointed at ground. "Jake, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Sheriff demanded. "Trying to do what law requires," Morrison replied defensively. "Law also requires due process. You can't just ride onto a man's property and take someone by force." Thomas felt hope. Sheriff Bradley was bound by territorial law, but he was also fair. "Sheriff," Thomas said carefully, "the boy hasn't committed any crime. He's been working for me. I'll vouch for his character." Sheriff studied Ayanna. "Boy, what's your name?" "Ayanna," the boy replied, meeting Sheriff's gaze steadily. "You understand that technically, you're supposed to be on reservation?" "Yes, sir." "And you understand Mr. McKenna could get in trouble for harboring you?" Ayanna's jaw tightened. "I offered to leave. He said no." Sheriff looked back at Thomas. "That true, Tom?" "It is." "Sheriff, this boy saved my life today. When those men threatened violence, he could have run. Instead, he stood his ground to protect me. That tells me everything about his character." Sheriff Bradley was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he turned to Morrison and his men. "Jake, you and your boys head home. If you want to file complaint through proper channels, you know where my office is. But there'll be no more vigilante justice in my county." Morrison's face was dark with anger. "This isn't over, McKenna." "It better be," Sheriff said firmly, "because if I hear about you bothering these folks again, you'll answer to me personally." After Morrison and his men rode away, Sheriff approached Thomas and Ayanna. "Tom, I understand what you're trying to do, and I respect it. But you need to understand the position this puts me in. Territorial law says the boy should be on reservation." "And what does your conscience say?" Thomas asked quietly. Sheriff looked at Ayanna, who stood straight and proud despite everything. "My conscience says a man should be judged by his actions, not his blood. But the law is the law." "Then maybe the law needs changing," Thomas said. "Maybe it does. But until it does, I've got to enforce it. I can give you some time to figure things out. Maybe there's a way to make this legal." That evening, Thomas and Ayanna sat on front porch, both emotionally drained. "You could have been killed today," Ayanna said finally. "Because of me. We both could have been killed. But we weren't. We stood together, and we survived. Morrison will be back. Others too." Thomas nodded. "Probably. But running from trouble doesn't make it go away. Sometimes you have to make a stand." "Why? Why risk everything for Apache boy?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment. 3 weeks ago, I was the loneliest man in Arizona territory. I had land, cattle, roof over my head, but I didn't have reason to get up in morning. Then you came along, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to have family." The boy's eyes widened at the word family. "That's what you are to me, son. Family. And family protects family, no matter what." For the first time since Thomas had known him, Ayanna's composure cracked. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he struggled with emotions too big for words. "I have lost so much. My people, my home, my name. I thought I had lost everything." Thomas put his arm around the boy's shoulders. "You haven't lost your name. You haven't lost your people's wisdom. And you haven't lost your family. It's just different now. Winter brought harsh beauty to Arizona desert, reminding both Thomas and Ayanna of life's fragility. The confrontation had spread word throughout territory, dividing public opinion sharply. Some saw Thomas as hero standing up for what was right, while others viewed him as traitor. Dr. Margaret Whitfield, the territory's only female physician, had ridden out to ranch a week after the incident. She was a stern woman in her 50s who'd earned respect through competence. "Mr. McKenna," she'd said, examining cut on Ayanna's hand from ranch work, "I've heard about your situation. I want you to know that not everyone in this territory has lost their moral compass. Appreciate that document. I've been corresponding with officials in Washington about Indian policy. There may be legal avenues to explore. The boy is clearly intelligent and well-spoken. With proper documentation and sponsorship, it might be possible to secure legal guardianship outside reservation system." The possibility gave them hope, but legal process was slow and uncertain. Father Miguel from Mission Church had visited twice, bringing books and offering to help with Ayanna's formal education. The boy's hunger for learning was remarkable. "The boy has natural gift for languages," the priest had told Thomas. "His English is already better than many adults, and he's picking up Spanish and Latin with ease. With proper education, he could become translator, teacher, even lawyer." The word lawyer stuck in Thomas's mind. A legal advocate who understood both cultures could do immense good in territory struggling with racial tensions. One evening in December, as they sat by fire reading, Ayanna looked up suddenly. "Tom, I want to tell you something." Thomas set down his journal. "What's on your mind, son?" "When I was small, my grandmother told me a story about two eagles. One born high in mountains, other in desert. They were different colors, hunted different prey. But when great storm came, they flew together to survive. After storm, they were still different, but they were also brothers." Thomas smiled. "Sounds like wise woman." "She was. But I think she was also prophet. I think she saw this time coming. I think she saw us." The simple statement carried profound meaning. In Apache tradition, Ayanna was acknowledging their meeting had been destined, that their bond transcended surface differences. "I'm honored to be your brother," Thomas said simply. Few days later, Dr. Whitfield returned with news that would change everything. "I've heard back from Washington. There's precedent for what we're trying to do. Several cases of Indian children being legally adopted by white families, particularly when children have been orphaned or separated from tribes." Thomas felt pulse quicken. What would it take? Documentation, character witnesses, proof that arrangement is in child's best interest, and formal adoption process. Adoption. Thomas looked at Ayanna, who'd been listening intently. It would make it legal and binding. Ayanna would become your son in eyes of law. He'd have same rights and protections as any other American citizen. The implications were staggering. Legal adoption would provide protection from those wanting to force Ayanna back to reservation, but it would also be final step that would legally sever boy's connection to his birth people. "I need to think about this," Ayanna said quietly. That night, they walked into desert under canopy of stars. Winter air was sharp and clear, carrying scent of sage and distant sound of coyotes. "What are you thinking?" Thomas asked. Ayanna was quiet for a long time. "I am thinking about two peoples, Apache and white. I am thinking about bridges." "Bridges. My grandmother used to say some people are born to be bridges between worlds. They belong fully to neither, but they help others cross safely from one side to other." Thomas understood. "And you think that's what you're meant to be?" "Maybe. If I become your son legally, I don't stop being Apache in my heart, but I become something new too, something that could help both peoples understand each other better. There's something else to consider. If we do this, if you become my legal son, you'll inherit ranch someday. Everything I've built will be yours." Ayanna stopped walking and turned to face him. "You would do that? Leave your land to Apache boy?" "I'd leave my land to my son, and that's what you'd be, my son, in every way that matters." The boy's eyes glistened in starlight. "And if I have children someday? Then they'd be my grandchildren, and land would be theirs after you. Imagine that, Apache children running cattle on McKenna land, carrying both legacies forward. Townspeople would not like it. Some wouldn't. Others might learn to see past their prejudices, and their children might grow up in a world where such things don't seem strange at all. They turned back toward house, where warm light spilled from windows. It looked like what it had become, home where two very different lives had found common ground. "I want to do it," Ayanna said as they reached porch. "I want to be your son, Tom McKenna, but I want to keep my Apache name too. We'll make it allowed. Ayanna McKenna has nice sound to it." The legal process took 3 months, complicated by territorial bureaucracy and novelty of situation. Dr. Whitfield proved tenacious advocate, marshaling character witnesses and legal precedents. Father Miguel testified about Ayanna's intelligence and moral character. Several neighboring ranchers spoke about Boy's work ethic and respectful demeanor. Even Sheriff Bradley submitted statement about Ayanna's conduct during confrontation. The hearing was held in Territorial Courthouse in Tucson. Thomas wore his best suit, while Ayanna was dressed in formal clothes that made him look older than his 14 years. Judge Harrison Blackwood was a man in his 60s, with steel-gray hair and penetrating blue eyes. He had reputation for fairness, but also for following letter of law. "This is an unusual case," Judge Blackwood said, reviewing papers. "Adoption across racial lines is rare, and adoption of Apache child is unprecedented in this territory." Thomas felt stomach tighten. Beside him, Ayanna sat perfectly still, composed but tense. However, the law is clear that adoption should be granted when it serves best interests of child. He looked directly at Ayanna. "Young man, do you understand what this proceeding means?" "Yes, sir. It means Tom McKenna would become my legal father, and I would become his legal son." "And you want this?" "Yes, sir. Very much." "Why?" Ayanna stood, as Father Miguel had coached him. "Your Honor, 3 months ago I was alone in desert, starving and without hope. Tom McKenna shared his fire with me, fed me, clothed me, and gave me home. But more than that, he gave me future. He has shown me that family is not just about blood, but about choice and commitment and love." The boy's eloquence surprised everyone in courtroom. Judge Blackwood's eyebrows rose slightly. "And you, Mr. McKenna, why do you want to adopt this boy?" Thomas stood. "Your Honor, Ayanna has brought joy and purpose to my life in ways I never expected. He's taught me about courage, about resilience, about seeing world through different eyes. I want to be his father because he's already my son in every way that matters. This just makes it official." Judge Blackwood was quiet for a long moment, studying both of them. Finally, he spoke. "In 23 years on bench, I've seen a lot of cases that tested my faith in human nature. This is not one of them." He picked up his gavel. "The petition for adoption is granted. Ayanna McKenna, you are now legal son of Thomas McKenna, with all rights and responsibilities that entails." The sound of gavel was like thunder. Thomas felt tears streaming down his face as he embraced his new son. Around them, supporters burst into applause. That evening, back at ranch, Dr. Whitfield had surprised them by arranging small celebration with Father Miguel, Sheriff Bradley, and several neighboring families who'd supported them. As sun set over desert, painting sky in brilliant shades of orange and red, Thomas and Ayanna stood together on porch, watching friends and neighbors enjoy festivities. "Do you think your grandmother would approve?" Thomas asked quietly. Ayanna smiled, first truly carefree expression Thomas had seen on Boy's face since they'd met. "I think she would say Great Spirit works in mysterious ways. She would say that sometimes best way to honor your ancestors is to build bridges to future." "What do you want to do now? You've got whole future ahead of you." Ayanna looked out at ranch that was now legally his inheritance, then at desert beyond that still called to his Apache heart. "I want to learn everything I can. I want to become bridge my grandmother saw in her visions. Maybe study law, like Dr. Whitfield suggested. Help other people who are caught between worlds." "That's big dream, son." "My father taught me to dream big," Ayanna replied, and Thomas felt his heart swell at being called father so naturally. As stars emerged in darkening sky, father and son stood together in comfortable silence. each understanding they had not just gained family. They had become pioneers in a new kind of relationship that could help heal wounds between peoples. The desert wind carried scent of sage and distant sound of cattle lowing peacefully in darkness. It was sound of home, of belonging, of two very different lives that had found perfect harmony in vast emptiness of Arizona territory. The lonely rancher was lonely no more, and the Apache boy had found his way home.